Chuck here again. Today we're going to take another look at some tools available within the Warcraftlogs website. Today we're going to take a look at the Problems tab, which is one of the tabs across here, and then we're also going to kind of dive deeper into finding specific pieces of information within logs. So the Problems tab is a pretty cool tool. It just displays some general information about fights, and it's kind of custom catered to each specific fight that is in a certain raid tier. So at the top of each Problems tab, you'll always find information on potion usage and healing tonic usage. So you can see kind of who's pre-potting and combat potting, who's doing neither, who's using health tonics and stuff like that. Most problem tabs have some information about avoidable damage. So for example, on this one, for Zul, I could take a look at who is not dodging volatile void step. From the Voidwalkers, thus spawning extra purple swirls in the fight, purple fire patches. And then as you scroll down, there's some other information. Cool piece of information here is for a lot of sources of raid damage. It'll show you how much damage is taken within that window, how much is healed back up, and what cooldowns are used for each of those instances of raid damage. It doesn't necessarily tell you who's using the cooldowns, but it's still good to know what kind of cooldowns your raid is using to mitigate different sources of raid damage. And we'll take a look at another Problems tab here for a second. Here we'll take a look at the Problems tab on an Archimon kill. Again, potion usage, healing tonic usage, the tab on slow, trickle-down deaths, more avoidable raid damage here, so I can see who took Doomfire hits, both the number of ticks they took and the amount of damage they took altogether. And look at who wasn't avoiding the consume magic purple swirls from the dogs in phase 2. And look at who was slow breaking shackled torments. Though as I analyze this, I want to keep in mind that maybe a person was told to wait to break their shackle torment or chose to because of the raid damage going on. So it's not always a bad thing. Kind of got to think about what the data is telling you and how your guild does that fight. I can see which Infernals healed themselves from being too close to other ones. I can see who took a lot of damage and ticks from Reign of Chaos. So a lot of good information here. And again, here's the raid damage section with all the different cooldowns used during each instance of that raid damage. So the Problems tab is a pretty useful piece, pretty useful tool, but we can always dive deeper using Warcraftlogs. That's just kind of an overview of each fight, and sometimes we're going to want more specific information. So the first thing we're going to take a look at here is damage done to a specific target. So we're going to go back and look at Zul again. I'm going to go over the damage done tab. So right now it's just showing overall damage done for the whole fight, but I might just want to look at damage done to a specific target. A lot of fights right now have high priority adds that need to die quickly. So I'm going to sort by that right now. I'm just going to look at damage done to all of the imps throughout the fight. So this gives me a summary of who damaged the imps most, and only the imps. Filters out all the other information. I can hover players' names and see what ability damaged the imps. Shocking, Bladestorm did a lot of damage to imps. I can kind of just shuffle through each player and see what abilities they were using on those imps. I could even click an individual player, and it would bring up kind of their full list of damage done to the imps. But let's say I wanted to know how much damage was done to one specific ad within the fight. Maybe I'm not so worried about the imps, but maybe I know the last round of Void Fiends. The Void Fiends lived way too long. So I might bring up Unstable Void Fiend number 16, the last one that came out. And I'll look and I'll see, oh look, only 3 ranged DPS were DPSing that Void Fiend, which may have contributed to it lasting too long. So I'll just know that maybe we got to make more raid calls there, or do something to make sure more people are contributing DPS to those Void Fiends, especially those later ones in a fight. But another thing I can do is I can actually filter by time, or length of time within the fight. Again, with the Zul encounter, we know that phase 4, there's no more adds anymore, and it's just a burn phase, because it's soft in rage. As Zul's raid damage builds, we're running into a problem where we're not going to be able to handle it soon. So now I'm going to filter by just damage done to Zul. And I know we bloodlusted right around the beginning of phase 4, so I'm going to take my cursor here and I'm just going to drag and only select this range. So you notice up at the top, it tells me that I'm now filtering just 546 to 650 on this kill. So just looking at that phase 4 damage, and I can take a look at who did the most damage to Zul during that burn phase. And again, I can look at which abilities did that damage, and a bunch of other pieces of important information there. Let's say I didn't want to look at the Bloodlust phase. I would reset my zoom. Let's say I wanted to, I'm going to pick some arbitrary times here, look at this stretch of time. So I only wanted to look at from 147 to 437. So again, just click drag. I'm looking at a specific range of time, damage done to a specific target. So now we're going to take a look at damage taken from a specific ability. we're going to go back and look at some Archimon pools here. We're going to go over the damage taken section. And let's say this time I only want to look at damage taken from a specific ability. So I only want to know damage taken from, let's say, Doomfire. Notice that Doomfire has two different spell IDs here. Normally what I should do is probably look up which one of those spell IDs means what. A lot of spells have different parts to them. So I could just take that spell ID over to a website like Wowhead and figure it out. But for Doomfire, I can actually see that the one Doomfire ID did no damage. So for whatever reason, no damage is associated with that, so I can skip looking at that one and just look at the other Doomfire ID. So I can see different players who took the most damage from Doomfire, how many ticks they took. I could sort by number of ticks they took and see who took the most number of ticks. Notice that's not the same as who took the most damage, because some players may have used different cooldowns to mitigate it when they had high stacks. If I really wanted to, I could, let's say, ooh, look at the Doomfire damage right here. So I could filter it again and only look at this one Doomfire where we took a lot of raid damage. I can see what was going on there. I'm going to reset my zoom now. Maybe I don't want to look at Doomfire. Maybe I'll switch over and look at Demonic Feedback. Now, this is another case, two spell IDs. I know one of these spell IDs is the splash damage portion and one is the direct damage portion that's unavoidable. So really just bringing up both these without looking up the spell ID is not telling me a lot of useful information, because I need to really figure out which one is which before I go to analyze that. And let's just do one more example. Let's say I wanted to know who took the most damage from Reign of Chaos. So again, that information is here. The number of hits they took of Reign of Chaos and how much damage they took from it. But let's say I just want to look at the last Reign of Chaos. You know, we're close to getting that victory. We need players to avoid damage here, and I would just say who took the most damage from that last Reign of Chaos. So I can zoom in on that part of the fight and see who took the most damage from that Reign of Chaos, including number of hits they took and then actual damage. What we're going to look at today is healing done to specific targets. We've kind of looked at damage done and damage taken, so we'll take a look at healing done to specific targets. So I'm going to look at the Tyrant Valhari pool. I'm going to go over to the healing tab. The first thing we're going to take a look at is healing done over a certain time frame. So let's say I just want to look at healing done in the last, like, about minute or so of the fight. Kind of zoomed into that on the graph here. And I'm just looking at healing done within that last minute to kind of see who was kicking out the healing during that fairly damage-intensive final phase. Just like before, the filter by time works by clicking and dragging, displays the data down here. I can hover over players to see what spells were doing that healing. I can also look at healing done to certain players. So here is just the healing done to one of the tanks, Feralicious. I can see he actually was fairly self-sufficient and did a lot of his healing on his own. And then our healers were healing him as well. Just like before, I could zoom in and say just in the final minute or so who was doing the most healing to him. A lot of flexibility I have in looking at that information there. But now we're going to take a look at something a bit more specific than that. We're going to take a look at healing done to targets with a debuff. On the Tyrant fight, there's a debuff that goes out that's a large healing absorption. And it's one of the core healing mechanics that healers have to heal that debuff off of players. So I want to look at who did the most healing to those players with that debuff. So I'm still in the healing tab, but in order to figure out this information, it's not as intuitive to get to as other pieces of information. I've got to go into the queries tab. Basically, this lets me filter down information based on different criteria I set. I will admit that I did Google this before making this video. So some of the queries you can kind of play around with and figure out. Some might be harder than others, so you can always find information on how to filter the information down. I'm going to set the pin type to a filter. And then first I need to identify people who have the debuff. So I'm going to click debuff here. I'm just going to uncheck buff because I'm only really looking for debuffs. And then I'm going to go down here to, I only want to match if that R is present. And I'm going to go down here and find the ability name in a list. It's only offering me a list of abilities that were used during this fight, so it's not like the full list. There's 2 touch of harms. If I was being thorough, I should look up the spell IDs to make sure they're both relevant. But I'm going to quickly just select both of them. And there's a second really half of this query. I need to look at healing done. So I'm going to click the AND button to connect a second query to it. I'm going to look at healing. And then let's go ahead and create this. So see, my healing graph looks really different now. Before there was healing done throughout the whole fight. Now the healing's only done in waves because I'm only looking at times of the fight where that debuff was out. So there's times where no healing are done to the debuff because it's gone, and other times where you can see there's spikes of healing done to players with that debuff. So I scroll down here and I can see which healers did the most healing to players with that debuff. Now if I hover over their names, I see what abilities they were using to do that healing. So I see one of my pals was shifting his beacon to those debuff players and then using his fast, high mana cost, high healing flash of light spell to top those people off and get that debuff to move off those people. And then I can see other players were using some heals on them as well. So that's kind of how to look at how much healing went into his players with specific debuffs. Note that this kind of setup of the two quarries could work on any encounter. You would just have to change the encounter to a different one and then change the name of the debuff. So I could also look at the Fell Lord debuff that has like a healing absorption, or other debuff targets on other fights. I could look at Kilrog, players who have the bleed from the Heartseeker. So a lot of flexibility with this setup to look at healing done to debuff targets. Pretty powerful tool there. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. We've kind of broken down how to look at major problems and then how to dive into the logs and find more specific information to address those problems. Thanks for watching.